Well, welcome housing team. We're going to talk about 516 Marsac Avenue, the old Peace House redevelopment. Take it away.
Okay, good evening, Honorable Mayor, Council. My name is Brown Seabright. I'm coming to you tonight for the first time in my capacity as the new Housing Program Manager, joined by Jason Glidden, Housing Development Manager. Like you said, we're going to be going over 516 Marsac, the old Peace House redevelopment options. So I got just a couple of slides we'll run through, and then we're gonna hopefully get a good discussion going. So just as background, the property was acquired by the city in 2017 using local transit dollars, and the intent and the use of the property with that acquisition was for transit employees, but obviously with the separation between Park City Transit, High Valley Transit, the demand for those transit employee housing units has gone down. So last year, council and the housing team started looking at properties in disposition and properties that could be used for potential housing development. And this is one of those properties. The housing team has conducted a feasibility study with an outside firm that's included as Exhibit A. And so for tonight, we're really looking for council direction on two questions. The first and foremost question is the preferred use of the site. That's really going to dictate kind of the second question we have, which is what is the preferred development option? So as a reminder, 516 Marsac, just across the street from us, it's in the R1 zoning district. That's a residential low density zoning district that allows for up to 3 units, a triplex on an individual lot. This lot is about 1/5 of an acre in size. So for context, that's about 4 Old Town standard size lots. So it's a decent amount of land for the Old Town neighborhood. And it is currently a 3-story structure with parking on the lower level, and it's accessed off Marsac with access to Ontario at the back, but it does have a pretty steep slope between the old Peace House and Ontario Avenue. So the housing team has identified 3 potential uses for the property. And so this is the primary thing we're looking for feedback from council tonight. The first use would be to continue its longstanding use as transitional housing. That is what the building was designed for. And so this particular type of use would be probably the least intensive amount of renovation cost and time, as it would just use the existing structure. The second is to use the building as it was intended for when it was purchased in 2017. That's for employee housing, although this would be to expand it to the general pool of employees for the cities as a long-term retention pool. This would require likely a more intensive renovation. And then the third option is to open it up even further to have it as deed restricted for purchase housing or affordable rental housing. And again, this would also likely indicate a larger renovation. So again, these are the 3 options that the housing team has identified, and we're seeking feedback from council on which is the preferred use. Once we have that preferred use in mind, we can take a little bit of a closer look at the development options. So in that feasibility study, it gave kind of a high level view, just acknowledging the geography of the site, the constraints. It outlined 5 potential redevelopment options, the first of which is to maintain or to redevelop the existing structure, either keeping it to the existing envelope or adding an addition to it. The second is to tear it down, build a new building, recognizing the constraints of the existing envelope. The third option is a potential rezone of the property. We've discussed this at a high level with Planning Director Milliken. This is a longer, more intensive process, probably more expensive, but it could potentially allow for maximum units for the site. The fourth option is to essentially keep the structure as is, but to renovate it to make up for usual wear and tear. And then that 5th option is to sell the property. And again, the housing team is not recommending this option just because of the size of the lot, the value of it in an Old Town location. It's a very valuable asset that it would be hard to replicate. So with that, we're happy to take any questions based on the staff report, based on the documents that we provided you. But again, the first and foremost question we're hoping to get addressed by council tonight is what is the preferred use of the site? And then once we have that, we can take it back, do a little bit more research on specific development options that would best accomplish that preferred use.
Great job. Thank you. and welcome to the housing team. Okay, council, let's go ahead and start with questions only. And once we get through questions, then we'll get into your feelings about potential use. So Becca?
Was renovating the garage, indoor garage spaces considered into units? I wasn't sure if I saw.
Yes,
And then just
it was
outdoor?
considered, but also, we do have parking requirements we'd have to meet, so they would have to take into account a little bit of that, but there's 4-car garage right there, there's 4 stalls in there. So there was definitely when we had the outside consultant tour the facility, so they got to see that and incorporate that into their potential design options.
I mean, it's not big enough to be a affordable master plan, but because of its location, it does seem like an ideal location to underpark something or to create additional units and create some.
Yeah, the only thing, unfortunately, the R1 is not an accepting zone for the affordable master plan development. So that would be another reason why you'd want to rezone if that's where you wanted to go.
You couldn't just have it as a conditional use to underpark it, or
You can obviously, I think you have the ability to ask for a reduction in parking to the planning commission. And that would be to their purview if they were to allow that.
I have a question. So, just because it's been a while, perfect world, how long would option 1 be? Maintain the existing building envelope and construct an addition take to get through the planning process if, all boxes were checked and we were efficient and had the time. And in an inefficient world, what's the margin of error there, basically, is my question for the administrative stuff.
Yeah, so we were thinking that from start to finish, including the review process, 24 months. The tricky part about option 1B is because it adds an addition, there is a sticky plat note that would need to be addressed at some point, and so that would trigger a plat amendment, which would be a more lengthy review.
Can you go back to the slides? Adding on to Max's question. So I'm looking at the redevelopment options. So on 1A, that would also take 24 months?
Not necessarily. I mean, because it wouldn't require to Brown's earlier point there about the plat note. There is a plat note that restricts the size of the actual house to the 2,600 square feet, which is where 2,600 was coming from. So we would have to amend the plat to amend that note to allow for a larger building to be constructed on the site. So that's the plat amendment to amend that note would have to happen first, and then we go into the construction of it. So we would anticipate, Max, to your question, if you want to get a little bit more specific, it's, maybe 6 months. I mean, the planning commission is really busy right now. So to try to get that even that small of a plat amendment done, it does take some time.
Yeah, because I was thinking if you just followed along and we had those 2 questions answered on each of them, estimate the cost and the projected time frame. So like if we go down to construct a new building, we just don't know how much that would even cost. Right? That's the one that would be missing from that one.
Yeah, I think that we'd be safe by saying that you can probably cut 6 months off of that 24 months off of to get to a timeline on 1A. I would feel comfortable with saying 18 months to get through. If you were to give us direction right now to move forward with this, then we could start going out for design. We could start going out for bidding, and start going and then enter into construction. I don't think the construction necessarily is going to take a super long time compared to some of the other projects, but to have a design and get all the approvals you need prior to do that and move forward with that, I think 18 months is probably about fair.
Okay.
If
And
you
then
add on the extension where you need to go for the plat, then I would add an additional 6 months. onto
that is 1B.
That's correct.
And then number 4 is just remodel what is there, no changes at all. We wouldn't even have to go to planning. This would just be remodel the inside, the interior, and keep it exactly how it is, correct? Okay. And we don't know we don't really know the cost on that one.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It depends on what the ultimate use of it is, but
Got it, okay.
it's still.
Yeah, I was just trying to compare like cost and time on each of them. So
Max, did you have a follow-up? Got it. Okay, Ryan?
On the remodel,
What's that, Ryan?
go ahead.
Yeah.
Just a couple of quick ones. So the plat note, does that require a vote of the HOA? So do we need the other two owners to approve it?
So I don't believe there's an active HOA, but it is a 3-lot subdivision.
Oh, so it's a subdivision, but they don't have an association. There's no vote to amend.
No.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then I guess just a general question. I mean, I'm all for sort of maximizing the unit count with the limited property that we own, sort of as a general proposition. But but then of course you're just thinking about this option number 3, rezoning the property. I mean, how do we think about just generally our probability of success in that effort? I mean, are we going to spend 2 years and we see significant roadblocks? Like, what does that road look like? What are the major hurdles that we're going to have to overcome?
Yeah, so it is a bit of an unknown. There are potential zones that we could look at and try to outline those in the staff report. The thing is, this zoning district has been in its current geography for a very long time, and so this would be amending a long-standing zoning boundary. And so if council wants to pursue that option, I think we're going to do a lot more research on exactly what we're getting ourselves into.
Okay.
Just in brief conversations with Gretchen, the planning director, she said that, it's pretty intense. I mean, you're going to all the property owners and getting permission from them to make a zone change, which could take a long, long time. So, and she wasn't necessarily sure, yet, like to Brown's point, that we would need to do some further analysis, but how much of that zone we'd really want to rezone. Obviously, you're not going to spot zone and do one property. You're going to want to do an area. What area would be appropriate? The low density was there for a reason, and it probably needs to stay in that area, but she said there could be a good reason to maybe change it to something that's to a similar zone that's close by, like the historic commercial district or something like that, that would make sense as a transition up towards this residential use. So she wasn't saying it's not possible. She just wanted to make sure we knew the challenges associated with doing a rezone in an area like that it could definitely take time, and there's no guarantee that there necessarily you'd be able to get it done.
Yeah. I guess I'm guilty of asking a question to make a point, but thanks.
Jeremy, I cut you off. You want to go?
Sure. Okay, remodel option 4, do we have a cost estimates on that?
We do not right now. But I would say that I did talk just to our building official, and we rely on him. And obviously the cost is pretty significant right now to do anything. But I would put it, obviously if you look at option 1A, I would say the low point of that is 1.4. I think that the remodel is going to be under that $1 million mark. But I wouldn't say it's too far under that. If you've been inside, the building is definitely has deferred maintenance. So
That's a tactful way to
when,
say it.
yeah.
well, and also I think
Let me
that
finish the question real quick. When you say redevelop, then is this referring basically to the drawings that were in the packet with those different options?
That's correct.
Okay.
So when I say redevelop, I apologize. Right now it's set up as transitional housing. So there's approximately like 5 smaller bedrooms, and a small common area, like living room area, and a large community kitchen. This would be to go ahead and in a sense gut the entire building and redesign it to have 3 separate, in a sense, condos or apartments. So that's the redevelopment part of it.
Understood. And then is there a number on option 5, what we think the value of the property is?
I mean, the neighboring property, which has a historic structure on it, is I think listed for 2 million. This is going to be a less restrictive property that is larger, so upwards of a couple million, I'd guess.
We've asked our property person to look into it to try to get some comparable sales or comparable prices. We haven't heard back from them yet, unfortunately, to give that information, but we'd probably estimate it obviously between the two and maybe, there's been some property. Yeah. We're thinking probably 2.5 to 3 easy in the current condition. But just because there is some limitations as far as the steep slope and what you can do with that zone. So there would be some restrictions.
Thanks.
Value.
Thanks.
I was just going to add to his question with the remodeling. It would also depend on the use, because if we have to furnish it, then we're going to probably have a different cost than just if we were not furnishing it completely, right?
Becca? Oh, go ahead,
Um,
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
You just nodded.
Oh, the way it's set up, is there the possibility of adding an ADU on at a later time? The way there's like parking spaces, could you add something on top or to the left or to the right and then go ahead and redevelop it and then come back and add a space in later?
Yeah, I mean, accessory apartments, they are allowed in the zone, so it's possible. It's got enough space where you could probably accommodate the parking if there's a specific use in mind that form would accomplish.
Yeah,
to
because
that.
I'm just wondering if there's a way you can maximize the space that is there and come back and do an addition at a later time, but still be able to move forward and get something in under 18 months. And talk about having some sort of application to reduce parking on the area as it is essentially as close to the transit center as you can get. Run right around the Marsac building and you're there.
I've been confused a bit, which is not unusual. But as we talk about what the redevelopment options are, it seems to me that we need to know who's going to be there. And your recommendation in the staff report was that it remain with employee be used as employee housing. So at what point do you anticipate us having a discussion about how we're going to use it?
So I think that's, as we said in our presentation tonight, that's probably our most important question to the council tonight is what is your intended or preferred use of this property? Because that will dictate how we move forward with any possible further investigation into development options for this property. If you're looking at a transitional housing use,
Right.
that's completely different road we're going down versus
Right.
if you guys agree with staff's recommendation to retain this for, the much needed city housing, employee housing, that would bring us down a different road as far as how we develop. So really what we're looking for first is, council to give us direction on what they think the best use for the property is. And then we can kind of have some feedback from you guys. With the limited information, we'd like to come back and give you more information once we have a little bit of better idea of the direction that you guys would like to go down.
Okay, so we'll segment the conversation that way. And then my question is, do you have any information on how many employees would be interested in this type of a housing option?
I don't have a number per se. We've been preparing some information as far as getting ready for the joint council meeting on the housing discussion there and taking a look at, the employees. And I think that currently right now, and we did this just based on looking at total number of employees of the city and then how many live within Summit County. And that's 46% that live within Summit County. If you move it into Park City, I know we're dropping down to 18% possibly. As far as I think the big telltale sign is open recruitments, where we're at 50 right now, 50 open positions within the city that we're trying to fill. And one of the largest challenges is housing, and which really led us to say that, this was, purchased for city employees. Granted, it was for transit and for seasonal, in a sense, transit employees. So that's why this kind of setup kind of worked. They didn't need a lot of space. They were coming in for a short amount of time. We don't have that demand anymore. If we talk to transit is looking for more traditional, like we are, as far as the rest of the city goes, where it's more longer term housing, which they could still use with this property. So that's why we went with our recommendation.
Okay, thanks. So council, let's segment it and talk about what is your preference for who would be housed there. And I know that we've had requests from different organizations in the community to use it as transitional housing. And do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I don't want to downplay that because that is a need in this community. Absolutely, transitional housing, and this type of housing, does have, there are groups out there that could use this housing. So I don't want to downplay that, and it is a need that we need to eventually, at some point address. We're in a crisis mode with the city here as far as our employee housing. And so why we stuck with our recommendation there. But I don't want to downplay that we have been contacted by several organizations that, would love to, that have been looking for these kind of opportunities and would love to see a partnership with the city.
And those, from what I understand, those groups represent organizations and populations that tend to be marginalized, and there aren't a lot of housing options for them.
That's
Right.
correct. Yes.
Becca?
Does having the housing as city employee housing, that wouldn't preclude us if there was a unit empty from using it as transitional housing for a little while or for a rental for the public in general, would it? I mean, if there
So
was
what we're
space
looking
empty,
at,
could we
and
fill it?
we're sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, that was it. I was just gonna ask if it was empty, would we be? able to
Yeah,
fill it?
so, really, we're trying to make the most efficient use of all the properties that we own. And so, we've been working with, HR, with the city manager as far as creating a program for a long-term city housing program. There is demand, but we would always want to have that fallback because you don't know, if that waterfall provision in a sense, right? Because there's other needs out there. And we have, look at the prospector units, some of those weren't used this year where we could have maybe used those for possibly, some J1 housing or something like that. So what we'd like to do is essentially create a waterfall provision that opens it up. Once a certain point that we don't have the need from the city, that it opens up to the general public to be able to have that be utilized. We don't want them to sit empty. It does us no good to have space empty.
Can I ask you one more question? Just so I understand, in the report that they did, on the very last page where they say multifamily stacked flats, that would require a zone change, or really could you do 8 one-bedroom units without changing the code?
Yeah, it would require a zone change.
Okay, that one would.
Yeah.
So which one, so the ones that would not would just be the triplex and the duplex?
Yeah,
options?
duplex and triplex.
Okay. Okay, yeah. I guess I was just thinking, do people really need 2 bedrooms if they were coming to work for the city? But that makes sense. Thank you.
So council, go ahead and weigh in. Who'd like to start? Ryan?
Yeah, I think Jason was making sort of a good point. You have to look at what we own as a whole and at a portfolio level, and how do you use the specific properties. So, I've gone down this road before, but to me, we look at the private sector a lot and talk about how they should be providing housing or how they can provide higher pay so that folks can afford to live here. In this case, when we're the employer, we have that same obligation that we ask of others to make it easier for our folks to live in the city. So, I think it's entirely valid for us to be thinking about municipal employees. And so when I look at the portfolio with the location of this lot, talk about a great offering to a potential employee to walk across the street to work, access to transit. I think that's really compelling here. So to me, it seems like the team has gone down the right road with that.
Okay, who wants to go next? Okay.
So sorry, this is maybe still a little bit of question as we go through this, but is it the demolishing of the building that requires the rezone, or if you can just find ways to add additional flats? Like, it's at what point in time is it a certain number of units that triggers the rezone, and how many units is that?
3 units is the maximum allowed under the existing code.
Okay, so if we do add extra units, then you have to, even if you do it as an ADU, or does that still trigger the? Because then you can get 4 units into that lot. Are you allowed to do an ADU onto a triplex?
Might have to look
Sorry.
into that.
I mean, I think that,
I love where your mind's at.
I know,
Yeah,
sorry, I'm trying to find this.
maximize it. We didn't actually, to be absolutely honest, we didn't even look at the possibility of doing like a triplex and then seeing about the possibility of adding an ADU.
Uh-huh.
We would have to come back to you and see if
Okay.
that's a possibility.
So I agree. I think city housing makes the most sense. This is a great area. It is really close to the Marsac. It's really close to transit. The only thing, it's not necessarily a super safe area for like, I wouldn't want to do transitional family with like kids or anything going back and forth across the street. It's a little bit dangerous. But yeah, I think if any way we can find to maximize the number of units we can get on the property or the number of beds, if it makes sense, if we can house like a couple or something like that.
Are you?
But
for
yes,
city
I'm
employees?
for city employees with some strong waterfall provisions that allow us to open it up if it's not being used for the city, so it doesn't end up ever sitting empty.
Tana, while we're on this side, where are you?
In this case, I'm actually for us trying to partner with someone for transitional housing on this. I think it's the quickest way to get a use out of this. And I think that's could be 5 or 6 people versus just having 3. I think we get them the quickest, it's the cheapest option. And in some cases, depending on the group that would want to partner with us, we might not even be spending very much money at all. And then we could use whatever it is going to cost $2 or $3 million to maintain our fund we already have for some projects that are already in the works.
Jeremy?
I struggle a bit with the, chicken and egg thing on this one. Because I think the use depends on, to some degree, what's feasible. And I would tend to lean on the side of rezoning's probably not all that feasible, just from a timing and delivery perspective. So I'd look for a quicker way to deliver it. So in that, I think the real question comes down to how many folks do we want to house here too? So if you look at the value, I'm like 2.5, 3 million for the property. We're talking another 2 to 3 million to create 2 or 3 units out of it. It's pretty hefty. So, I don't mind carrying the asset on the books because we'd own it, but I also don't want to be in the management game, right? Like, I think we need to get out of that, like what we're doing with Homestake and not collecting rent checks anymore. So I'd probably say transitional or employee. I mean, I do believe employee housing's a big need. I'm just not sure this delivers an impactful enough solution. And if the current setup, which is more common area style, right? If that can work for transitional needs or even for affordable needs. I mean, I've heard from folks in the community who have been run out of rentals in other places, specifically in Old Town, because someone sold the property or whatnot, that they'd be more than happy to share a kitchen if they could have an affordable place to live and stay in town. Maybe we could serve 5 or 6 people instead of 3 people and save $3 or $4 million while we're at it, and have an asset that way. So
Perhaps the transitional or those people could also get a job at the city.
yeah, I don't have a good, clear opinion for you. I'll admit that, but those are the thoughts in my head on the spot.
I'm gonna put you right in the middle because you said both, so.
Well, per usual, I can give you a pretty clear opinion. I think that we're falling short on our capability to provide housing for employees at our upper management levels. Those recruitments are incredibly difficult. Talent is hard to come by. Communities across the West are starting to pay more and more and more money, and they're poaching our best talent. Our quality of life is as good as any of those communities, but I'm not sure our quality of life will continue to be enough better to pay less. And therefore, we need more assets at that level. And I'm not saying that this is going to meet the level of need that we have for all employees in our community, but I think a young professional family could move into 2,200 square feet in a walkable zone where they can do everything they need to do with our city resources. And you could potentially have 2 families here and a couple, and you're actually housing quite a few people. And you give us a recruitment tool that we're going to need long-term. Families like that aren't going to move into a community like Park City because they can't afford to. But that's the type of talent that you need to build a long-term employee in the city that can bring that institutional knowledge to councils 15 and 20 years down the line. And I think this is the type of product that could provide us a little bit of a leg up on some of our competing communities for talent. So I think we're going to have a little bit of what you call a brain drain in Park City, because I talked to council members today who are actively recruiting some of our best talent in this building, and they're not even shy about it. They're asking for more phone numbers and I'm holding them back for a minute, right? So this is an opportunity for us. Recruiting that kind of talent and turnover at those positions costs us a fortune. We've seen it over and over, $250,000 to figure that out. When we have this kind of a competitive market, it doesn't take us long to get to that $3.8 million that at $500 a foot, it's $3.8 million to turn the existing structure into 3 units. If we can figure out how to get 4 with an ADU, I'm all for it. I think we can deal with a plat amendment if we have to. I would like to see options within the existing envelope, and then options with an addition and what that extra 2, 3, 4, 500 square feet means. If it's not a significant add, I'd say cut that 6 months. Let's work within our existing envelope. Let's get 2,000 square foot apartments in there. Let's do the best we can with efficiency and make it a comfortable place for our high level staffers to either move into, or a recruitment tool for us. I agree with Beck on waterfall provisions, just in case we can't fill those units. I think that they could rent at a pretty penny, and we might end up with an asset going forward. I agree, Jeremy, we don't want to be in the property management game. That said, we kind of got to be in every game right now in order to be competitive, because I don't think any other community across the West is saying, I don't want to collect checks if I have an asset like this. I don't want to build buildings and be a property manager holistically, but in this particular instance, I think it provides us too much of an opportunity. And I really don't want to see it wasted. Secondarily, if none of that works, I agree with Tana. I think it's a great transitional housing piece, and we might have some options there that are cheaper. So I would say secondarily, keep our foot in that game and see if somebody comes to the table and presents us with some option for transitional housing where they pony up. We don't have to spend the money and we can maybe do something like this elsewhere. Totally think that that's a good option B, because you never know. These costs could get out of control. This could get a little bit crazy for us. So that would be my 1B option.
Just a quick comment on that. So, and I agree with your points. I think the base assumption of using this for employee housing is that people are going to want to live there. And when we start targeting high-level executive employees, that does come into question a bit, right? Is this the type of property that someone would be looking for? Or would we be better served selling the property, taking the money we were going to invest in it, and buying 3 or 4 single-family homes in the area and using those for that purpose? And it came to mind while you were saying it, because one of my first jobs, I had an apartment that looked at where I worked. And the big joke was, why the heck would you live where you can see where you work? And it's kind of a thing, honestly. And it was a challenge there. It was in right out of college in the DC area, where housing was already very limited, 20, 25 years ago, and expensive. And it didn't solve the problem. So I would just caution us to make sure that if we go down that path, that we're very confident that this is the type of product that would meet that need, versus investing that money to meet the need another way.
Can I say, because if you think about it, let's say we could sell it for 3 or 4 million, and then it's going to cost us 3.1 right now. I mean, that's $7.5 million for 3 units. Like, when you think of it that way, that's a lot of money.
Well, it's not actually, that's not a 1-to-1 cost. It's not.
Whole day to cut that money to put towards something else. I don't know. I mean, I just like thinking about the fact that we own the property. I don't know. It just seems like a lot of money to spend for 3 people.
We have
Right.
about 3 minutes left in this conversation. It sounds like the preference of at least 3 of the council members is to start with employees and look from there. You know, and I'm going to weigh in on this one because I feel strongly about it. And I think that we definitely need to have housing for employees. We need to use that as a recruitment tool. I agree. I'm not sure that's the best place for it, but I also feel like we have marginalized communities here. We have marginalized groups that don't have other options, such as our neurodiverse communities, such as our drug court graduates that have to stay in this community and work in order to graduate from the program. So if we can't use this property as that kind of transitional housing, then I think we have an obligation to look at where else could we be doing that. And if it doesn't work for this as employee housing, perhaps this could be transitional. And we have Woodside 2 about to be drawn. Perhaps we could look at some ways that we could add the kind of units that Jeremy's talking about and you're talking about for our upper management into that Woodside 2 project as well. That's just my thoughts.
Can I say, it's two, I think those are good points. And I sort of agree with obviously what I said first. I agree with Tana. I agree with you, Nan. I mean, it's a testament to the scale of our affordable housing challenge that you can't build a unit of affordable housing that isn't the right unit to build. It's just, I mean,
Right.
you almost can't pick wrong. So, yeah.
So with that sketchy kind of direction that we just gave you.
Yeah, so just if I could just clarify really quick. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
Well, I was just going to scope one thing real quick, and if we end up deducing to the second option, which is some type of a transitional housing unit, can we be clear when we return that we'll be looking for a financial partnership in that investment, or is your concept that the municipality would be sort of funding that, or we'd be looking for funding partners? Because I think it's going to be an important part for this group to return with. Is that something that we're taking out of the affordable housing funds or the general fund, or is it something we're looking for a financial partnership? It sounded like it was the latter, but I just think it's important for these two moving forward.
I can say I think we would need to have a partner of some sort for 2 reasons. One, financial, the second, for management of a housing, of a transitional housing piece like that. That's another layer of management that I think maybe the city isn't positioned well to take care of. So we would need help one way or the other. So I would say add the financial piece in there.
That work? Okay. Thank you guys so much. And with that, we will stay open. We'll give council a 10-minute break. We'll return to the back of the room and have our closed session.